chapter 6 and verses 1 to 2, Paul tells the Ephesians, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right." He quotes the Old Testament, "Honor your father and mother," and says, "This is the first commandment with a promise." Then he gives the promise as well, "that it may go well with you, and that you may enjoy long life on the earth." I suppose it's not surprising that Paul says something to parents and children in the description of the radical new lifestyle that he's talking about that Christians have to live. Because in his day, in the Roman Empire, disrespect for parents was becoming increasingly common, especially at the top end of society. The Ephesians had heard the stories from Rome, for instance, of how Nero had fallen out terminally with his mother Agrippina, the ambitious woman who had put him on the throne of the Roman Empire. She'd tried to interfere just too much, and so Nero had her sidelined, and then exiled from Rome, banished completely, and then he made several attempts on her life, botched attempts, until finally he managed to finish her off once and for all. But respect for parents obviously didn't loom large in his scheme of things. It wasn't great for Julia either, the daughter of the divine Augustus, the earlier emperor, who was supposed to have got everything right. She was the only daughter he had, but he couldn't handle her. And she lived such a scandalous lifestyle that in the end he had her exiled from Rome as well. And whenever her name came up in conversation after that, he always used to say, "I wish I had been childless." So parents didn't always get much respect from their children, and Paul was saying not only is this right, this is what God wants, but also he's commanded it in the Old Testament. And this commandment's a bit different because it has a promise attached to it. He's right, it is the first one in the whole list of 10 commandments that has a promise attached. In fact, it's the only one that's got a promise attached to it. Perhaps what Paul meant was that after the 10 commandments, God went on giving commands to his people, and some of those had promises attached to them as well. But this is the first one in history, the most basic of the lot, where there's a promise attached. What's the promise? Obey your father and mother, honor your father and mother rather, that it may go well with you, and you will enjoy life on the earth. Is he really saying that if you're good to your old mum, and you phone up your old dad occasionally, and you respect them in the way that you should, life will go well with you and you'll live a long time? Surely any of us could be run over by a bus at any point. Accidents happen to people. Well, of course they can. And Paul knows that. But what I think he's saying is this: if you don't live this way, if you live your life in a state of perpetual war with your relations, if you live in a state of hostility between parents and children, then what you're doing is using up your mental energy, your emotional energy, wearing yourself out, living in a way that God never intended human beings to live. And the backbiting and the malice and the bitterness and the sheer effort trying to put one over on other people all the time will gradually wear you down. But when you live in harmony with what God wants, then your life is extended because it goes well with you, you enjoy things, and life just has an extra quality that you don't have when you're living in a way that goes against the grain of God's plan. After all, your Creator knows how you function. And so the laws he makes for your life are not just random rules that he thought up over breakfast. They're actually the way you're designed to work. And so when we do what God says, it's the best way of ensuring that we'll live a long time and enjoy every moment of it. And that applies, of course, not just to children and parents, does it? It applies to everything else he says as well. Whether there's a specific promise attached to it or not, we can be sure that when God asks us to do something, there is a very, very good reason for it. And that good reason has something to do with our benefit, our extended life, and our enjoyment. God wants us to have a great life, and that's why he keeps on giving promises along with his commandments. Try to live his way today. If you find yourself going in a way that causes strain and anxiety and tension, ask yourself, is that because I'm going against the grain? Am I living in the way that God meant me to live today? Have a good one.